Okay, so we were saying, what kind of agriculture, which landscape? Our answers, landscapes that renew and generate resources rather than consuming and depleting them. Next one. Another one. According to FAO, food security is the situation in which all people at all times have physical and economic assets to get enough nutritious, safe food to develop a healthy life. Next one. In spite of this, 8.9% of the world's population are undernourished. Another one. And 9% are severely food insecure. Next one, please. The COVID pandemic between 2019 and 2022 aggravated this situation and raises questions about future actions. Next. In this way, we came to a point where United Nations Development Goals, particularly goal number 2, zero hunger, have attained global consensus. Nevertheless, to reach such goal in 2030, globally, we would need $260 billion per year to accomplish this target. Next one. Next one. Climate change is a threat to agriculture and human life, further threatening the already fragile food security of human society. Next one. Next one. This map shows the distribution of cropland extent worldwide. The next one. The image portrays droughts and flooding areas affecting production and food security. Next one. Here we see a global map of lands and crops affected by extreme drought and flooding due to climate change. Next one. A key response from landscape architecture to this situation is resilience, ecological and social resilience. Next one. Sensitive and aware of such challenges, during the international conference held in Oslo in September 2019, the IFLA World Working Group on Agriculture and Landscape was appointed. Next one. Here we see IFLA 5 regions worldwide. Next one. And this is our World Working Group on Agriculture and Landscape, which I chair. And these are our 5 representatives, one from each of the IFLA worldwide regions. Our action axis, no, remain where you were, please. Go back. Our action axis, next. Our action axes are development of strategic regional plans, regional supporting groups, core areas webinars and networking, like the one in which we are now, and boost of in the fields hands-on project, which is a very important one. We believe that together with general statements, agreements, and such, we are moving fast to a new stage in our professional life, in our good practices, which is having hands-on projects. And then we'll see a video regarding a number of these projects we are developing at the moment. Next one. As a working group, we work through 5 core action areas. RAIL, which is the IFLA strategy for rural, ancestral, and innovative landscapes, which is led by the IFLA Europe. And this is an event we are at the very moment being organized and presented by this group. OLA is the IFLA initiative on oasis, landscapes, and agriculture, dealing with drought areas and solutions, and it is led by the Middle East region and the Africa region. FLAG, which is the IFLA project on extreme water-related events and agriculture, deals with flooding, tsunamis, and sea level rising, being led by the Asia-Pacific region. And finally, the IFRA proposal for landscape, agriculture, and migration, which is called LAM, and it's led by the Americas region. Can we go to the next one, please? A case in point, in pursuit of the attainment of these targets, we work closely with IFRA international allies. Next one. A case in point is the agreement with the IACA. The IACA is the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation and Agriculture, which is the largest agricultural agency of the Organization of the American States. This agreement has allowed us to develop an in-the-field hands-on project portfolio, which is very active. Next. Also, MOUs are being negotiated with FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. The only program regarding landscape or landscape architecture that FAO has developed is the so-called JAIAS program in English and CIPAM in Spanish. And through IFLA and through the IUCN, we are trying to allow FAO to have other landscape programs apart from JAIAS. The next one. We are also working with the International Union for Conservation of Nature, and then in a triangular fashion suggested by the IUCN has already existing agreements with FAO, and then that would be the way we are going through as to have IFLA enter or share some of these agreements. In this triangular fashion, we are going to be able to be the three organizations plus the IACA working for our programs. The next one, please. Through our organization, as we just described it, and these liaisons, we aim to respond to present challenges and needs to come. Now, if we go to the next one, perhaps the video would like to work. So can we make the video work and see the projects we are doing?
Sorry, Carlos, I'm not very polite in this moment, but we are really very, very late. So if you can
I shall finish after the video, which only lasts 1 minute. Then you have a last slide if you want to put it through. The next slide, which came after the video. There is another slide. Can you? Okay. So welcome again and let the webinar begin. I'm sorry about all the technical problems.
Okay, thank you so much, Carlos, for your introduction. And usually it's not so easy to have the help from the technology. So I'm really proud to be part of your extraordinary group and do this kind of excellent job that you showed. Good morning to everyone, and thank you to participate to our webinar. It will be very, very short. Just I want to introduce, let me, okay, thank you. To the working group of IFLA Europe on agricultural landscape. We are 8 people coming from different nations from Europe, and we are very good friends, and we work very enthusiastic all together. And apart the organization of this webinar, you can also find some outputs. For instance, this leaflet that we produced, caring for agricultural landscape, but you can find also in French, Spanish, Italian, German, and Greek version. And next will be the Czech Republic version, in which we want to transmit how this rural landscape are so important for our future, not only and the role of the landscape architects. And the other one is a competition just closed on rural landscapes, just to raise the awareness about the importance of rural landscapes. So really, thank you so much. I close here because we are really very late. And please, Steffi, introduce the speakers. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Francesca. Also from my side, welcome everyone. My name is Steffi Schüppel. I'm a landscape architect from Dresden, Germany, and I'm the spokesperson for international affairs of the BDLA, Federation of German Landscape Architects, and I'm also a member of the working group that Francesca just introduced. And I'm very pleased to be the moderator for this webinar today. Just quickly about the webinar, we got now 3 keynotes from 3 speakers. The lecture was supposed to be about 20 minutes each. Maybe now, as we are a bit behind in the time, you can cut a little short, if I may ask that, maybe that's possible. And after each presentation, there will be the chance for short questions of understanding. But then after the keynotes, I will shortly introduce our panelists and we will continue the discussion with the panel. I would like to encourage you to write your questions also in the chat. We will pick them up and then we will answer them as much as we can also in the discussion. So I would like to introduce now our first speaker. I give a warm welcome to Merrick Denton Thompson from the UK. Merrick has worked both in the public sector and at all levels of government and in the voluntary sector throughout his career. He served as the president of the Landscape Institute of the UK from 2016 to 2018. Merrick is specialized in strategic and local planning, urban regeneration, and the rural land use. Together with his team, he pioneered the landscape character assessment back in the early 80s, which then was undertaken for the whole UK. He participated in drafting the 25-year environment plan for England and has directed 2 of test and trials for the new environmental law management system, which is going to replace the common agricultural policy in the UK in 2024. Merrick, the stage is yours.
Steffi, thank you very much indeed, and welcome everybody. I'm flattered to be asked to talk to you all. I'm very conscious that this is a presentation very much about Northern Europe and the situation in the UK, particularly relevant, I think, to today's agenda because we are actually having to review how our rural landscapes have worked, given that we have left Europe, and I won't say any more about that mistake. We are having to put in place new policies for the United Kingdom. Next slide, please. So very quickly to look at that review. Basically, of course, the Common Agricultural Policy was extremely important in terms of repositioning agriculture in Europe. But I would say that there have been some unintended consequences. What I mustn't do is to blame the Common Agricultural Policy. I'm going to blame my own government for the way it's interpreted the Common Agricultural Policy. But very quickly going through some of those consequences, and I'm very conscious I'm going to have to rush through this given the situation. So I will just pick a couple of points. First, the intervention in the markets in Europe in the 80s, trying to take the risk out of farming. The implications for the United Kingdom was we hemorrhaged mixed farming almost overnight. Because the risk had been taken out, that attracted a huge amount of public institute investment in agricultural land. And consequently, not only did we lose the skills, but we also saw land prices, a rise in land prices, which have replications today. The second big point really is that so many of our interventions in land management have had some disastrous impacts on the landscape. And I will be talking in detail about some of those in a second. The next image, please. I think that the thing we can all agree on is that the agenda is changing. Many countries have a very sophisticated way of moderating development, but too few of us, and I include the United Kingdom straight away, have a proper, clear intervention on land and natural resource management. We've tended to develop our governance systems around change and big investment, but we have failed to understand the implications on climate and on the biological health of the world, the implications of land management. So in the introduction, Carlos quite rightly pointed out the extreme implications of climate change. I'm going to be focusing very much on the impact of agriculture driving climate change. So next image, please. So I'm going to concentrate very much on two big issues. One is the use of inorganic nitrogenous fertilizer on climate change and on water quality. So in the United Kingdom, 2 years ago, we applied 1.5 million tons of nitrates to our farmland. And that has generated 100 million tons of equivalent of carbon dioxide emissions. And you might say, why? Well, Dave Ray from Edinburgh University has written an extremely good book, which I recommend you all look at. Nitrogen and Climate Change is the name of the book, and I can give you more information if you email me. But basically, he's saying that the applied nitrogen on our fields, immediately, because of its solubility, you immediately get nitrous oxide being emitted. And nitrous oxide is 300 times more powerful a generator of climate change than carbon dioxide is. And so when you look at the implications of that statistic on the amount of nitrates applied worldwide, you can see from my slide that 7.5 billion tons of CO2 is emitted through the nitrous oxide. And this is a very, very serious, that, for example, is 15 times the whole of the United Kingdom's emissions. We are now having to import water to dilute the drinking water. We are now seeing algae blooms across the intertidal zones of southern England. And we now know for some of our soils, and let's look at the chalk soils of southern England, if we switch off the nitrate tap today, we are locked into 40 years of groundwater pollution. Next image, please. And the other point to make really is that the use of pesticides, very, very clever science, but nowhere near clever enough. And the unintended implications and consequences of the whole family of pesticides, particularly on soil health, has been an absolute disaster. So I'm being provocative by saying the irresponsible agricultural science. I believe that to be the case. So science may have the answers, but science has generated massive worldwide problems. Next slide, please. So in our drive for new policies in the United Kingdom, the government has rightly said to the farming industry, we're going to work collaboratively with you on restructuring the demands we make on land management. And so these are the sort of multifunctional outcomes that we've identified. Obviously, clean air, clean water, obviously restoring the microbial health of our soils, and a move that might surprise some of you, that we've some of us anyway, have agreed that secure, sustainably produced food is actually a public good and worthy of public investment. So I won't go through the rest of that, but I perhaps mention obviously the issues about landscape character and the conservation of historic environment, and modernizing in a very heavily populated small island as we are, the whole issue about access and involvement in rural affairs by the wider urban-based populations, because we do have a real issue around health and well-being that can be transformed by reconnecting people with natural systems. Next image, please. Next slide. There are a lot of issues here that are worthy of discussion. Natural capital accounting, where we are actually accounting for clean water, clean air as a product of land management and farming. What we have found is that many farmers who are indeed adhering to sustainable disciplines are having to compete in a marketplace with 80% of the farming community who are not adhering to sustainability disciplines. So what are we going to do worldwide? Are we going to ratchet up our regulation, increase our regulation, or are we going to develop a collaborative partnership with the farming industry to achieve the transformation of climate change emitting gases, and to restructure and restore our natural systems? So that's a big question: regulation or partnership? I'm not going to go through the emerging markets issues. I don't have the time for that. Next image, please. So I'm just giving you an example of one of the tests and trials I'm involved with the British government. And this was a farm by a friend of mine, 1,000 hectares. You will see that he uses absolutely no pesticides and no inorganic nitrogenous fertilizer at all. He actually takes excess nitrogen out of the atmosphere by fixing nitrogen using things like sandfoin. He's standing in the middle of a field of sandfoin, which is a vetch that basically fixes nitrogen and then slow releases. His entire approach to biology is that his biosecurity answer to biosecurity is biodiversity. His farm is one of the richest. In fact, the Wildlife Trust has said it is the richest farm for wildlife in southern England, from an intensive, essentially it's an intensive and very productive farm. Very, very rich biologically. So just one example, we have 23 species of British bumblebee in the United Kingdom. He has 18 of them present in large numbers on his farm. I won't go through all the other issues. But the research we've done also comes up with another couple of statistics I do want to mention, and they're there in the image. He is sequestrating 128 tons of carbon per hectare. That is double any other farm that we could find. Now, that is a really important point in terms of the new emerging markets around carbon. So we mustn't just see the sequestration of carbon locked up in trees. You can lock up enormous amounts of carbon, and they are essential to sustainable food production in our soils. And then the other point that might interest you all is when we start giving values to public goods from the management of land, we did a projection of the value, the net value of the food produced over the next 60 years, and that was 5.4 million. We did exactly the same to account for all the public goods, and we came up with 125 million. And that is using the government's basic measuring techniques. So this is going to transform the relationship between the farming community and the wider public. Next image, please. I won't spend too long on this, but very quickly, the other pilot I'm looking at is a way of developing collaboration across the public, private, and voluntary sectors in delivering this new agenda. And here, which is directly relevant to the European Landscape Convention, we are using national character areas, which are maps, not plans. I need to emphasize that. And they map, of course, the interaction between the farming community and soils and microclimate and ecosystems. So this is actually the product of farming. Yes, it's a cultural landscape, of course, as well, because you have got the character determined by settlement patterns. But in terms of the majority of the landscape, this is a farming map. What is great is that there's a very good business case for intervention, because you know that when you intervene in particular land management activities, you will get the same results within those boundaries. And that's very important in terms of a good business case for intervention.
Sorry, if I interrupt, I
yes.
would like you to just sort of start wrapping up.
Right, I'm going to terminate now, Steffi. The final image then is just a snapshot on what I perceive the future of farming will be. Can I just say to the audience, please use my email if there are any reports you would like me to send you. And the information I've got has all been funded by public money and is accessible to anybody in the world. I'm very sorry that I've only given you a snapshot of the work we're doing. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much, Marek, for the very interesting presentation, which introduced us to the multifunctional desired outcomes of the new environmental management system, alongside with also the important issues to be discussed, like the question whether aims can be achieved with regulations or rather through collaboration. So with this, I would like to introduce you all to our next keynote speakers, which is a team of two. We are welcoming Lena Athanasiou from Greece and Manuel Sanchez from Spain. And I will give a quick introduction first to Lena. She's a horticulturist and landscape architect educated in the UK and Greece, and has been teaching landscape architecture in higher education institutions in Greece since 2005. And since 2002, she's been participating in national and international research programs related to crop protection, organic farming, landscape architecture, and urban rejuvenation. She is the co-author of 2 books on organic culture and land use planning, and published a number of articles in scientific journals and conference proceedings, while also working as a reviewer in several journals. Finally, she serves as president of the FALA, the Pan-Hellenic Association of Landscape Architects at the moment. And I would like to also quickly introduce Manuel. Manuel holds a master's degree in landscape architecture from the Polytechnic University of Madrid, with a specialization in rehabilitation and of historical gardens and cultural landscapes. He is the delegate of the AAP, the Spanish Association of Landscape Architects in IFLA, and member both of the communications group and the working group Cultural Landscapes in IFLA Europe, as well as the Spanish representative in the MedNet group in IFLA Europe. He is the director of the film and landscape season at the Royal Botanic Garden of Madrid, as well as the director of the Festival of Landscapes of Extremadura in Spain, which is focused on the outreach and protection of the Mediterranean landscape. Lena and Manuel, the stage is yours.
Okay, can I share my screen, or I probably can. Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yes, you can put it full screen and then.
Right, I'm very pleased to have this talk with together with Manuel, who is a very good friend and member of the IFLA Europe Agricultural Landscapes Group. Since I have been there, he's been longer than me. And we're going to talk about blurring the lines between urban and rural, and how we can make a pact between cities and countryside.
Do you want to, put your presentation full screen?
Is it? I think it is full screen. Can you see it?
We just see it in the normal view.
Oh,
On presentation.
I did put it on presentation, but I don't know why you can't see it.
Maybe you have more than one screen.
Yeah, maybe Daniela can share so we can don't waste time because I don't know how to do that. Let me just check one more minute. I'm sorry about that. Now you can see my PowerPoint. Can you see my full screen now?
No.
Okay. Can you share, Daniela, so we don't lose time, or maybe Manuel?
Yes. In that way, it is fine.
Yeah. Yeah, no problem for me. Just scroll down. Okay. So we have to talk about the city bit because it is a main concern for us dealing with agricultural landscapes, and the city is a constructed landscape. It does epitomize human intelligence and creativity. It depicts social, cultural, and economic development, and to be honest, still remains and probably will for the next years the most favorable and important habitat for the human species. Please, Manuel. Now, is it moving? Yep. And this is like a photo from my house where I live nearby, and I think there's always going to be an epic conflict in many areas in the world where anthropogenic settlements are gaining land over free space, whether this is a stream, as in this case, or definitely legal, whether it's agricultural land or more. Please, Manuel. And then we have kind of what I say, one use over the other, because we have cities versus agricultural lands, and we have an overlay of land uses. For example, this is a transhumance image where we have sheep crossing over maybe summer pastures to go to the winter pastures, and they are kind of using now a road, which is an anthropogenic infrastructure, a very concrete one. So we have an overlay of uses. Manuel, please. And then we have all of this in-between land, which it's kind of a UFO, an identified kind of thing, which we don't know if it's rural or urban, if it's agricultural, if it's semi-natural, if it's free of concrete, but it does exist. And this definitely exists in the Mediterranean cities and countries of the world, and maybe some others, and it's called suburban landscapes. And then we have a common agricultural policy. I was very interesting on what, and on very sincere presentation of how countries interpret the CAP, because governments interpret the CAP very differently of what has been written in text. But the new CAP policy says we have to preserve landscapes and biodiversity, and we have to make vibrant rural areas, and we just have to do that. Please, Manuel. And then these kind of vibrant rural landscapes and the suburbia are changing rapidly. This is also an image from Thessaloniki. These used to be cereal fields. Go, Manuel, please. And I give the speech to Manuel now, and then I'll come back.
Okay. Thank you all. And I'm very glad to share this presentation with you, Lena. And thank you all the presence. Okay, I'm talking about some examples in Spain about the surrounded areas, agricultural areas and around the city. Madrid is in the geographical center of the Iberian Peninsula. It is 300 kilometers from the nearest coast. According to the Köppen classification, Madrid climate is Mediterranean, in transition to a semi-arid climate. As well as a root, we can find most of the bioclimatic zones on the peninsula, as well as a rich representation of a great variety of ecosystems with an interesting biological diversity. Madrid is the Spanish region with the highest increase in population. More than 77,000 people have arrived to the region in recent years. More than half have registered in the capital. The growth has been slowed down during these years of the pandemic, and this year it seems to be will increase again. All this population either increases the density or increases the extension of the city. The region and the city begin to blur their limits. Now you can see in this diagram how it is increasing the urban soil. Now this is an imagine of Castello that it is a typical paint of from 70th cycle. Now that this is the place out of the city when people live. They make there the parties, the meetings, the celebration. Even it is a place for working. The peri-urban environment of the city of Madrid is as a sort of non-place with spaces between infrastructures and roads, abandoned agricultural areas, and some of unconnected protected areas and green areas. Therefore, the creation of infrastructures, blue and green, that support the limit of the city, creating a range of biodiversity is not only a good idea, but also necessary. In this photograph, now this is the outskirts of our cities now. It is more or less in all around the world. This is an urgent need to create an infrastructure, blue and green, that support the limits of the city, creating a range of biodiversity. At the same time, it offers character and improves the feeling of belonging to that empty landscape, that it is not people living there, or people that hasn't the connection to their places. There in the south and in the down of the photo, there is some images of the project that I am going to share to you now. This is the Bosque Metropolitano. And this is an operation to unite and sue this operation seeks to unite and sue the empty plots around the city, filling the gaps derived from operation. It works on city lands, but aspires to expand to adjoin territories. It has to be a forest structure. This large forest, you can see on the area, will be surrounding the city of Madrid. It's in a green infrastructure that will extend over 75 kilometers. There are 600 hectares, and it will contribute to improve the environmental quality of the city, reducing the CO2 emissions, restoring ecological landscape of degraded areas, and to increase pedestrian and cyclist spaces, thus managing to fight against climate change and improve the health of the population. In green, we can see the new forest with the extension with the natural and protected areas of Madrid. So maybe it can be really a well of forest in the city. So the project is made by 4 types of landscapes. The first is the dehesa, which is strongly sizing one of the extensions of the surface of these silvopastoral structures, a complex system adapted to the climate of the center of the Iberian Peninsula. The second type is a mixed Mediterranean forest with green corridors and experimentation of reserve areas, restoring uncontaminated soils. The third type of forest is the forest with water. It will be present in the restoration of riverbanks and streams and well as accompanying areas of lagoons and wetlands. There are also seasonal waters that it is very common in the Iberian Peninsula. And the last type of these forests or this kind of landscape, it is the edible forest. It is a space associated with the agricultural and the productive tradition in constant disappearance. So the typical species that we will work on the agricultural around Madrid.
City of Thessaloniki, Manuel, can you turn the slide? The city of Thessaloniki has actually been surrounded by forest here on the right. We have huge agricultural land on the left, and we have a lot of lagoons within a big gulf. Please, next slide. And it has been, of course, impacted by urban sprawl. To the east and to the west, here on the northeast, we have the massive suburban forest, which stands and does not allow urban sprawl. And the agricultural land here on the left is still not impacted by urban sprawl. Please, Manuel. This is my PhD thesis showing 64 years of urban sprawl in the eastern part of Thessaloniki, and the huge green plot in the middle was arable land. So we have all mixed uses being tended to during the years. Please, Manuel, next slide. And this is the urban land uses. The black, as you can see, I'm not gonna talk about the colors. You understand that the black is the most rigid concrete, and as we go further, we have green areas, which means that we have a little maybe house with 140 olive trees. So where we had no trees and we had arable land in the past, now we have maybe public little houses with trees, and that is very important. Next slide, please. We have, of course, a huge fragmentation, as I said, of this big plot of arable land to other uses, agricultural uses. Please, Manuel, next slide. But we have some interesting facts. For example, we did not have the suburban forest back in 1945. We do have it now. Please, Manuel. And in order to study, because we're scientists, you need to separate, for example, and use the quantification methods. But the fact is that all elements in suburbia are intertwined in a strange balance of plasticity and change. Please, Manuel. So we should be looking at that. We should be looking at this intertwine of land uses and how this can be possible for people to access and live in. And suburbia is a huge, huge subject in the Mediterranean. Please, Manuel. So as Merrick said, things are changing. We have climate change, but we also have this need of a more slow life and connected to nature. I'm actually in Iceland and it's been extremely calm everywhere. So I'm gonna move here maybe. So I think we need to identify the new landscape and its balance. And this is where landscape architects can help. We can introduce good elements to the public by careful planning and design and using the agricultural lands as recreational lands also. Manuel? And two case studies very quickly, 30 seconds. This is a forest, a little like a forest. This is the big forest, as I said, I'm sorry. East and northeast of Thessaloniki. And there we had, next slide, please. There we had the path of the ice makers. We had ice makers in Thessaloniki before electricity came that used the beech forest to create ice and transport ice to the city via donkeys and mules. Now they were the carers of this beech forest that is now has nobody to care about. So they were the carers and they were living in the forest. So there are other kind of uses of, cultural lands that should be taken care of. Please, Manuel. And this is a slide we did with the students about how the history of ice came to be. Please, Manuel. And one more slide of how we can introduce people to this forest and maybe introduce farmers again to this forest or foresters. Please, Manuel. And the other example I'm going to finish with is we have this very beautiful lagoon outside Thessaloniki on the west side where the huge agricultural plot is. And please, Manuel, we can see the flamingos there. They're very close to us. And they're directly related, Merrick, to nitrogen. There are studies. And please, Manuel. And as you can see, the most important thing is this is not an agricultural land directly, but the best thing you can do is just provide access to people. So you have to train them to use the spaces. And the best thing you can do also is provide access to agricultural lands. I was amazed by the rights of way system in the UK. Merrick, please, next slide. And then you can have a very little interaction or big interaction with the birds. And go on, Manuel. I think I'm done. Yep.
Okay, my turn again. We have three more examples, but very, very quick, Steffi, if we have time. So this is the city of Pamplona, the first sample. This is the Aransati Park in Spain. So it is a project made in 2008. This is made by Aldea Jover, and this is a public contest promoted by the city council. It is a place for the orchards. This is a park and a landscape that was with the persistence, orchards, river vegetation, and river to create the pedestrian and leisure routes. The projects understand its hydraulic logics to floods and propose that park collaborate with the functionality of the Arga River. When it increases its water flow, it slightly reduces the frequency of flooding of the orchards and at the same time are generating a fluvial landscape within the park, a natural landscape to suggest the seasonal dynamics of flood water. Next example is in the south of Madrid. This is the Agrarian Park in Fuenlabrada. This is the example is found in the south of Madrid. It's a traditional area of orchards and crops of 292 hectares. That it is that in 2013 the city council decided to convert into an agricultural park. The Fuenlabrada Agrarian Park is a pioneering project in the community of Madrid that brings us closer to fulfilling the SDGs. The City Council has been involved in strengthening a local and sustainable food system, supporting and modernizing the local agricultural sector, promoting the consumption of local food, and preventing the peri-urban agricultural landscape. And we have another example, that this is the last one. This is in the city of Valencia, in the coast of the Mediterranean, in the east of the Iberian Peninsula. This is the third city of Spain. No. Sorry. La Huerta de Valencia covers an area of 2,800 hectares, including the historical Huerta, and the area of the Albufera National Park. It is formed by a system of crops irrigated by the river Turia through canals and ditches, which has maintaining its traditional characteristics in a densely populated coastal region. The resulting landscape structure is an Arab heritage, shaped over centuries from the time of Al-Andalus. It works like a cushion around the third city of Spain, functions as a soft limit for the city, highly defined by its inhabitants, and it was declared a geosite by FAO 2 years ago, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. So it is 3 examples that we want to have, 3 examples that I want to bring you from Spain. So thank you very much. Thank you, Lena.
Thank you very much. Also from my side, Lena and Manuel. Your presentation has been drawing our attention to the land in between the suburban landscape and its characteristics, and also the effect that the growth of the cities and the urban sprawl have on these surrounding landscapes. But also there were very interesting perspectives for these landscapes and the role for biodiversity and also for human well-being. So thank you for that. And I would like to introduce now our third keynote speaker, which is Francesco Ferrini from Italy. He's a professor at the Department of Agriculture, Food, Environment and Forestry at the University of Florence, Italy, with a background in horticulture and agricultural sciences. And his main research interests are general arboriculture, ornamental and urban arboriculture, and in particular, the research on the impact of, for example, of shrub hedges along roads to reduce air pollution, the effect of water stress on woody species as affected by drought, or the carbon compensation planting to offset the CO2 production. He is the recipient of numerous awards for his work, like the Fabio Rizzi Award for his constant commitment in research and service in the field of plant nursery service and urban arboriculture, as well as the International L.C. Chadwick Award for Arboricultural Research, or in 2019, the Award of Merit, the highest honor bestowed by the International Society of Arboriculture. Francesco, we are very much looking forward to your presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that you have to allow me to enter the room from another computer because I'm on the cell phone now. So, okay, got it. Perfect. Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear
Yes,
me well?
yes, you can.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can't hear you.
Francesco, non ti sentiamo. Ti vediamo, vediamo la presentazione, ma non ti sentiamo.
Adesso mi sentite?
Sì.
Ok, perfetto. Scusate, era disattivato l'audio, non me ne ero accorto. Sorry, my audio was off, so I wasn't aware of. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I will try to be on time. I will talk about trees because I work with trees, so I think that trees are the backbone of the city of the future. But to have trees, to have green areas in the next future, we have to change the paradigm. It must be not the green at the service of the city, but the city at the service of the queen. You can see this surgery room. The surgeons are working on trying to operate in the new city, and a surgery room assistant comes with 2 trees. We have to do just the opposite. So we have to work with trees, and the surgery room assistant should bring some buildings that must fit inside the urban forest. Because we have to think about city in the future, which are not project of urban vanity, but they must focus on putting the people's needs at the first place. So we have to plan city of the people, city for the people, inspired by the people. I will talk about the effect of urban area in some different factors, like the improved health and well-being, increased CO2 storage, mitigating the urban heat island, preserve biodiversity, stormwater management, and reducing pollution. I have put in evidence 3 of these because we are working with my group on these 3 factors, and I will just go through the others. So in terms of improving health, we have to think about that every 2 seconds, someone between 30 and 70 years dies prematurely because of non-communicable disease, like cardiovascular disease, chronic respiratory disease, diabetes, or cancer. And then between 3.2 and 4 million people die every year in the world because of the exposition to particular matter, especially in the third world country. As you can see in this graph, this is a work done in Albania a few years ago. You can see how the mortality for diabetes, mortality for pulmonary disease, or from cardiac problem is strongly related to the absence of green areas. The less the green areas in the city, the higher is the mortality for these 3 different factors. And as you can see in this histogram, how the percentage of people who feel that their health is less than good goes down at increasing the percentage of green space. So the more green spaces you have, the lower is the perception of to have a health less than good. And we have to introduce in the city of the future the concept of one health, meaning that tree health, vegetation health is strongly related to the animal health, which is at the same time strongly connected with human health. So if the environment is doing well, we are doing well at the same time. So this is the first concept we have to keep in mind in planning future cities. The urban heat island, we are doing a work with the municipality of Florence and municipality of Prato,
In Italy, we know that, for example, in the United States, from 3 to 8% of the total power consumption is related to the offset of the urban heat island effect. So we have to reduce this consumption, especially in this time where the power, the energy is so expensive and so needed. As you can see here, you can easily see how at increasing the tree canopy cover, you can see a decrease, a strong decrease in the temperature. The temperature in this research published a few years ago, you see that without any canopy cover, the temperature was 44 degrees. With 30% of canopy cover, the temperature was 5 degrees less, which is a higher amount, and it can perceive in a very different way. You can perceive a very in a very bad situation, or in a better situation. So we need to increase our tree cover very, very soon. The question is, we just need more trees, or we had to think that probably we had to think about having where, how, what, why, who, when you plant trees. This is the 4W and 1H. We have to answer this question before deciding to plant trees anywhere in the world. So what is going to be planted, when it's going to be planted, how it will be planted, where it will be planted, why? Because we need the reason to plant trees, and who will be in charge of planting trees. Because it's important, you see, this is a summary of the findings about the effect of green spaces configuration and of tree diversity on climate regulation. You see how the different cooling effect in according to different green space form and shape, the different cooling effect about related to the shape and the size of the leaves, the dimension and the form of the tree canopy, and also all the other implications which are related to the cooling effect of the vegetation in the urban environment. And in this case, you have to be careful also on biodiversity. The more biodiverse is a green space, the higher is its effect on reducing the temperature. This is a recent paper published by some Chinese researchers that shows how a more biodiverse urban forest is more effective in reducing the temperature compared to a monoculture or a forest which has just a few species. And it's also important, you see the difference between having only trees, which is whose cooling effect is about minus 0.6 degrees, trees and shrubs, 0.9 degree less, and to have a secondary forest, meaning you have trees, shrubs, and you have also the understory vegetation. In that case, the reduction of the temperature can be up to 1.7 degrees. So it's not just the trees which are effective, but all the ecosystem, the forest ecosystem, that is much more effective than just trees. And also the effect of trees on stormwater management. We are not working on this, so I'm just referring to someone else's research. We know that the water cycle is completely different in the urban environment compared to the open agricultural lands. Usually in the agricultural lands, 55% to 60% of the water that falls, of the rain that falls on the ground infiltrate, both deep infiltration, shallow infiltration. In the urban area, sometimes the percentage of water that infiltrates the soil is less than 10%. On average, it's about 55 to 60%. So most of the water that falls in the urban environment, in a paved environment, is lost by runoff. So in the future planning, the first thing to do is avoid the impacts, meaning we have to preserve all the natural features that we have by using conservative planning techniques. Second, thinking about the DNSH, do not significant harm. So we shouldn't destroy, we shouldn't damage the environment anytime we realize something, anytime we urbanize an area or we build an area. Second, we have to reduce the impacts. How can we reduce the impacts? We can reduce the impacts by reducing soil sealing and impermeabilization. As I told you before, we have to increase the percentage of water that can penetrate the soil in the urban environment, because it can also constitute a reservoir for the summer months, especially in summer like the one we have just finished. Today is the first day of fall. We have passed one of the driest and warmest, and I would say hottest summer ever in Southern Europe and also in Central Europe. So all these, reducing the impact, means to regulate carbon uptake, to reduce evapotranspiration, to regulate the atmospheric temperature, and so on. Third, we have to manage the impacts. We know that anytime we realize something, we urbanize an area, we construct a road or a building, there will be some impact. So we have to use the new techniques like the low impact development, like the sustainable urban drainage system or the water sensitive urban design for stormwater management. These will help a lot in increasing that percentage of water that penetrates the soil. Much better than me that we have a lot of different green areas. All green areas are somewhat effective in reducing in helping stormwater management. What we have to think is to have all these different green areas working together like a steering wheel, like a wheel, like in an engine, in a mechanical engine, so that they can work all together to improve the stormwater management, to improve the water infiltration in the soil. We have to think about green areas like an internet of pipes. So we can have green areas, we can enjoy the green areas, we can have all the benefits that the green areas can provide. At the same time, we can control flood, we can manage the stormwater supply distribution, and we can also improve the microclimate. So we have to think about nature-based solution, but it's not enough. We have to think about the city like a sponge. You know that in China, the new city are planned like a sponge city, meaning that cities are structured and designed to absorb and capture rainwater and to use this rainwater subsequently to irrigate, for example, or also for domestic use. The next step is the landscape-based stormwater management practice. This term used to describe practices that at the same time manage stormwater in the landscape, but also they are the visible landscape components. So this is the next step of the new planning for the future city. The other target is reducing pollution. You know that different trees can have different effects on reducing pollution. For example, leaf traits are very important in deciding what trees to plant to reduce air pollution. I put this example. You see that, you know that mountain maple on the left has hairy leaves, so it's much more effective than Norway maple on the right that has very smooth leaves. This is the research done in China. You see the different species how behave in terms of removing particulate matter, also according to the different leaf shape and according to different leaf margins. So the difference in the leaf accumulation of atmospheric particulate matter depend on the shape, the vine, and the margin of the leaves. This is a research we have done, and we are still carrying out in close to Florence. We have tested 7 different shrubs. I'm just referring to the heavy metal deposition. You see how the Eleanus X ebingii is much more effective than the other shrubs tested to reduce the content of lead, zinc, and nickel, while bay laurel, Laurus nobilis, is more effective with regard to copper, to reduce the copper content in the area. This is a project we have just finished. It's a live project. We have measured the ecosystem services by different urban species in 2 cities, in Rimini in Italy and in Krakow in Poland. This is the working group. What we have found in terms of particular matter, you see that the different species, both some shrubs and some trees, have different efficacy in reducing, in absorbing PM10 per unit area. In this case, you see horse chestnut, holm oak, and box elder are more effective than the other species. This is a paper we have just published in Science in Sustainability. You see that how all the particular matter accumulation changes according to the different species, with Quercus ilex, holm oak, that has shown to be the most effective species to reduce particulate matter in the air. Just to summarize this, when we have to choose species for reducing PM in the atmosphere, we have to focus on different variables, but usually evergreen broadleaves and evergreen conifer are more effective than deciduous. But you have to think also about the size, the growth rate, the canopy structure, the leaf complexity, as I said before, the leaf size and the leaf surface features. So it's not just a matter of planting trees, but we have to plant the right trees in the right place and for the right reason.
Sorry to interrupt. If I can ask you to maybe wrap up in the next 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Great.
I have just a few slides. Sorry, 3 slides. Sorry, I'm finished. We have also measured the CO2 assimilation per unit leaf area, showing that some species like English oak or black poplar are much more effective in CO2 assimilation. So these species should be chosen where we need to reduce the CO2 in the atmosphere. But usually having the highest biodiversity is much better than having a few species. So just to finish, we have to put the green at the center of our future life. We have published this paper. You can download from the link. It's in the bottom of this slide. It's the Rivista from the Landscape Architecture Department, the Architecture Department of the University of Florence. So all the things I have just said are in this paper. And I'm finishing by saying that I recently became the editor of this new journal, Frontiers in Horticulture. They have a session in floriculture and landscape, so I encourage you to submit papers to be evaluated for publishing this new journal, which will be probably indexed in a few months. And that's it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Francesco, for your presentation, which made it very clear to us that the trees are actually the backbone of the city of the future, as you mentioned in the beginning. And I kept in mind as well the change for paradigm, that not the green should be at service of the city, but the city should be at service of the green. So I think this is very important. And also, thank you for giving some important hints for the planning and design process, also quite in interesting details. related to the urban green. So thank you very much for your presentation. And I would like to thank all of the speakers so far for their collaboration in cutting a bit short their presentation. Thank you very much. But with this, we were able to recover some time. And now we can start with the discussion, also with our panelists that I firstly would like to introduce quickly.
Sorry, I have to leave because I have another conference.
Okay.
Conference.
So thank you very much for your participation.
In vivo present. Anyway, you can write to me anytime. You can give my mail address to all the other panelists and to the people so they can contact me for any needs. I'm sorry, but I have to speak at 3 o'clock in another room. So
okay.
I have to leave.
Thank you very much
Bye-bye.
for your
Bye-bye.
presentation. Bye-bye. So I would like to go on and introduce the panelists of our panel discussion. First, I would like to welcome Mr. Mihail Dumitru, which is originally from Romania. He is the Deputy Director of the General Directorate, General Agriculture and Rural Development, the DG Agri. He is an agriculture economist specialized in economics and the rural development. And he carried out his postgraduate studies in France and Greece and holds as well a PhD in economics. After having been working on a big state-owned farm in Romania early in his career, he moved into the economic research in agricultural economics and the rural economics at the Institute of Agricultural Economics at the Romanian Academy, where he was head of the research department. In 1995, he joined the delegation of the European Commission in Romania, where he followed the whole process of Romania's accession to the EU. And in 2006, he joined the DG Agri, of which he became the deputy director in 2014. I would like to welcome as well to the panel Cristina Kincis from Hungary. She's a landscape architect and the national representative of Hungary in the European Landscape Convention. She was a chair of the Council of the European Landscape Convention between 2019 and 2021, and a member of the Bureau of the Steering Committee for Cultural Heritage and Landscape, CDCPP. She participated in many activities around the European Landscape Convention, for example, as a member of the jury for the Landscape Award of the Council of Europe, as a member of the Working Group Integration of Landscape and Sectoral Policies and the Working Group Landscape and Democracy. She also received several awards in her career. For example, she was awarded in 2020 the Landscape Architect of the Year in Hungary. Welcome, Cristina. And I would like to welcome also Eugene Pănescu from Romania as a representative of the Architects Council of Europe. He is architect and urban planner and founder of the Planwerk Studio in Romania. He contributed to the rebirth of the public space and the transformation of the professional practice in planning in Romania. In the European Council, in the Architects Council of Europe, he was elected member of the Executive Board between 2015 and 2018. And he's the chair of the Urban Issues Working Group and coordinates all around the Baukultur thematic area. He follows the European Urban Agenda and the Partnerships for Culture in the European Heritage Alliance. And last but not least, I would like to welcome Jürgen Tack from Belgium. He studied biology, marine ecology, and obtained his PhD in sciences at the Brussels Free University. And within the framework of the Kenya-Belgium project in marine sciences, he developed a number of oyster farms along the Kenyan coast. In 2000, he joined the Belgian Diversity Platform, and he became the CEO of the Research Institute for Nature and Forest in 2007. And in 2016, he took the position of the scientific director of the European Landowners Organization, ELAO, for which he's now participating in our discussion. So welcome to all our panelists. And I would like to invite also our presenters still to participate in the discussion. And I welcome now any questions from the audience. I see that there were already some questions asked and answered also in the chat. So you can raise your hand or you can write in the chat. And maybe as a start, I would directly ask a question to Mr. Dumitru. And I would like to ask if there's any strategy or political ambition from the European Commission or your DG on how to secure sustainably produced food, climate change, and biodiversity in the way that the land and the natural resources are managed.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear and see me well.
Yes, we can.
And I want to thank you for inviting me to this panel and to give me the opportunity to participate to this interesting discussion of your webinar. So to go directly to your question, I think the European Union has one of the most elaborated strategic framework for addressing the food, the sustainable food systems, the climate and the biodiversity. And just let me remind you that we have adopted a Green Deal with the objective of setting and making the European Union climate neutral by 2050 with an intermediate target in 2030 or by reducing 55% of greenhouse gas emission. And then we translated this in four, I will only mention four, I will call the sectorial strategy. We have a farm to fork one, which set up the path towards transforming our food system in a fully sustainable food system. I also want to remind you here that probably in Europe, we have one of the highest environment, climate, animal welfare standards we are asking our farmers to comply with. Then we have a biodiversity strategy, which fixes also very ambitious targets, and this is based on returning land to nature, and the objective being to restore and preserve the biodiversity. We have a forest strategy, which is also one of the main users of the land in Europe, and we would like to continue our multifunctional role of the forest and the sustainable forest management approach. Of course, also paying a lot of attention to the role of forest in preserving and maintaining biodiversity and its role in the circular bioeconomy for the future. And we also have a look and a strategy to look to the future of our rural areas. We have a long-term vision for rural areas. Of course, we have one of the longest serving policies in Europe. We celebrate this year 6 years of the Common Agriculture Policy. And we have there the money and the instruments to address all these ambitions. And you know, this policy has been changed regularly over the years, and we have introduced more and more elements and more incentives for our beneficiary of the policy to move into sustainability, climate emergency, environmental, natural resources management, sustainable management, and even more now we are introducing new elements and giving a lot more flexibility in the member states. I would like to remind you that we are in a union of 27 member states, and to translate this strategy, we have to go down to the member states governance. So Anton Thompson, he blamed the government of UK for translating the CAP into, and having some collateral damages. I think we are now working with the member states in the process of how they translate this ambition in the national strategic plan for the following 5 years. So they have to use all these instruments to develop a strategic plan and to target these very important objectives. And then they have to implement them, and I hope that our farmers will take them and you will use them, and they will contribute to this very ambitious objective. Of course, they are always complaining that we are asking them more and more. And I just want to remind you that we have regulatory elements where we ask them to do something in order to receive the EU subsidies. Now we have asking more because we have introduced more conditionality, more standards to be respected by them. But then we also have incentive elements. And because today Professor Francesco Ferrini, he mentioned about the role of trees, just to remind you that we have introduced a new instrument which is called Eco Scheme, and we hope to see more and more agroforestry systems introduced by the farmers, which combine, trees with crops, and which is something we are doing for centuries, but we are rediscovering it now, and we know how important it is for our climate emergency. So I can elaborate a lot of this, but I know that we are short of time, and I will stop here. Of course, we have instruments, we have funds at the EU level. There are also funds that can be mobilized at the national level and regional level, and we have plenty of actors in this system. We also, we have another component of our policy, which is looking to the rural areas and the rural areas development. And we are working since long time to develop this interlink between urban and rural. And I think we want to see more and more developments of some of the projects I saw here today in this interlink between urban and rural development. So I stop here, and I'm ready to answer other questions and intervene again. Thank you.
Thank you very much for answering the question. So I asked to the audience. I see now there is one question in the chat from Francesca Neonato, again to Mr. Dumitru. How in the CAP are protected and enhanced small medium farms that usually produce local foods supposed to be good, healthy and clean?
Well, that's a very important question, and this is one of the objectives of the recently reformed Common Agriculture Policy. One of the objectives of this policy was to make distribution of support more equitable. And this was one of the sticking points in our political process of adoption of this reform. And finally, we ended up with a redistributive mechanism, which is supposed to give money more to those on need, and especially these are the small and medium size, which play a very important role in the local economy, in producing local food. Of course, we have plenty of other instruments. For instance, we have a quality policy, which we support, the protection of the locally produced food, which are protected at the European level, the so-called geographical indication policy. And many of the local producers, they are very proud to make their produce known, to have the protection at the European level. We can support the promotion of this product. We have plenty of other instruments like investment. One of the most important policy tools, and which we wanted to emphasize and to strengthen, was support of generational renewal and preserving young farmers in rural area, or bringing new farmers in rural area. And we consider that we have enhanced the possibility of installation of new farmers, or keeping the existing farmers there in the new policy. And we hope that this generational renewal can happen more and more, because we really have a problem with the generational renewal in our rural areas.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Please raise your hand or write in the chat. So I would like to ask a question to Eugene Panescu. Increasingly across the world, urban-based communities have been dislocated from rural issues. What would you suggest from your point of view to reconnect our cities with the countryside?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. Before going straight to an answer, which cannot be simple, and perhaps I don't possess the whole answer, I would like to thank you for the insights that I've been hearing today before, and tell you that as representing the Architects Council of Europe, so to speak, the architects designing in Europe, I feel now a little bit both sides, being a part of the solution, but also being a part of the problem, especially in the urban and metropolitan areas, which is now my focus to this discussion. In this regard, the subject that I tackle in the Urban Issues Working Group that I'm chairing inside the ACE, we look very much at the connection to space, to planning and also to landscape, having our sisters organization, the IFLA and the ACTP, the planners organization, and we look to see how we can improve the design inside cities, but also the fringes of the cities. So from this regard, I think the land consumption, the rapid urbanization, especially in the rapid developing metropolitan areas, is a serious issue that is having no real acknowledgement and responsibility today, because the desires for quality for some produce and neglect landscape and produce damage to the landscape by consuming it and also urbanizing it in a non-sustainable way. So we enforce very much the need of integrated policies to be clear what actually the development effort means, not only for public administration, but also for citizens, for dwellers of the cities, and especially of the new pieces of cities. We as well promote, in a way, the cultural landscape and the heritage, the visible and not visible heritage, the habits of the land, connecting them to a shorter food chain from the producing spot, which is usually the farming, which was also the previous question, to the local consumer. Of course, these last 2 years have been reverting a type of dynamic that was taking urban dwellers outside the cities and placing them more or less randomly in the landscape or in the rural areas, in the vicinity of the rural areas. But this is only a transitory situation. So we need a lot more instruments. And from our side of design, but also from the planner side, I think this type of attitudes towards cities and the surrounding landscape have to be very clear, into limiting land consumption for building, into forcing cities to be more compact, to debate the quality of the urban landscape and the density together, not separately. And then, of course, looking of how our colleagues and professionals can learn from each other. These type of interactions for us are too rare still, and we would be very happy to get together with you, with the working groups and also your guests, and the topics you have presented a lot more often. Perhaps I stop here. I also look at the chat if there are some questions.
Thank you very much. Indeed, there is one which pop up now. Tony Williams wrote to the panel, what is your key impediment do you see to the implementation of nature-based solution? For example, is there a lack of knowledge, or is it not promoted, or what can be the problem?
Yeah, if I should answer to that, it's a bundle of issues here. Of course, lack of knowledge and the relatively young youth of this notion is one topic, but then we also, in the design phases, we face a lack of willingness from the clients and public administrator side to open up to this topic. Also, the type of investments that don't always align with what has been done before. The technological side is always promoted, and especially to speak about the water in the city. The rainwater, the technological water, the rivers and lakes, all these things are highly seen on the technical side, not on the natural side. Rejuvenating and bringing back rivers to the situation that have been a couple of hundred years before urbanization is also something that is not so easy. So all these type of solutions need a lot more professional muscle behind in debating on public policies, but also on the design phases. I think the good examples are not circulated enough, and the nature-based solution needs a lot more concrete examples immediately when you mention it, because otherwise it remains a little bit too vague.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask as well a question to Christina. The European Landscape Convention celebrates the rich diversity of landscape character across Europe. What is, in your opinion, about the master plans that should be developed for each landscape character areas or types with the farming community to set out a new agenda, which should be multifunctional?
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. The question is very, very good. The question lays down general and specific. Maybe I should speak about the convention before I jump into the middle of the topic.
Yeah.
May I ask?
Of course.
Okay, so first I would like to mention that I am here at the initiative of Michael Oldham, the founding president of IFLA Europe, my good friend and mentor, with whom we have been working for many years at the Council of Europe Landscape Convention. And the Council of Landscape Convention is the first international treaty devoted to sustainable development. And the parties to the convention have committed to the protection, management, and planning to landscape and cooperation on these. And at this point, I have to mention that the convention now, it is not a European convention. It is open for non-European countries also, and it is open for signature and ratification to non-European countries since last year. And the Council of Europe has 46 member states, and comparing to the EU has 27. And both two organizations, based on the same values, I mean, human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. And therefore, I believe that the IFLA Europe should try to influence these international instruments to further enable the national associations to have a greater impact on the national implementation, both the directives of the EU and the implementation of the convention, and the recommendations belongs to the convention. And I can provide some arguments and facts for this to that work. Undertaking the commitment of the convention, recognizing the landscape as an essential component of natural environment, it ensures not simply the well-being of the landscape, but it also the well-being of people. The focus of the Landscape Convention is ultimately on human well-being. Importantly, the premise of the Landscape Convention is to take all landscapes into consideration, regardless these condition or legal status. And that is why it belongs to planning systems. It doesn't mean that we have to apply all the same measures and policies to all landscapes. Measures should be adapted to each landscape, as well as a need to various forms of treatment at local level. And the convention lays down general and specific measures, leaving the parties the choice of means to fulfill their obligation without any derogation. And in doing so, establishing procedures for the participation of the general public, local and regional authorities, is fundamental. In more general terms, landscape must become a mainstream political concern, since it plays such an important role in the well-being of people, their quality of life, and their future. And the well-conceived policies will have to combat nowadays problems, challenges, as it mentioned, not only climate change, but poor air quality and food supply safety, also to reflect to today's topic. Preserving the specific characteristic, ensuring comprehensive and systematic management, it was also fundamental, and the planning system also very good opportunity to add. But unfortunately, not all the countries apply the characterization of landscapes, and maybe the system is not very well known. We have to introduce this system all over the world. And we should give people an active role in decision making on landscape. It will help them identify with the areas where they live, with the towns, and the good experience in the participatory process will ensure their continued involvement. Helping to promote sustainable development and respect of area concern, appreciating and enjoying a landscape that has an important bearing on social initiatives and economic success. I took some examples from the Hungarian strategy, but maybe I can return back if we have. So I would like to give time somebody who, because we are in short in time, but I have some examples. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Well, thank you very
It's
much
better.
for your input. And I see there was also a question. Merrick, you wanted to ask the question, I think.
Thank you very much, Steffi. Yes, my question was to Jürgen Tack. First of all, thank you for attending this very important webinar. I was pushing a very big landowner to realize that what he was doing on his land had effects outside of his land ownership. And he eventually conceded, and he said, well, I suppose as landowner, I'm a tenant for life. And I just wondered whether you'd like to comment, because we have got this very difficult tension now, that the ramifications, the implications of land management from landowners and of course managers does have a much wider impact upon the world than perhaps we had really acknowledged in the past. And this does create a dilemma. We don't want to see massive regulations. We want to see, through communications and education, we want to see a collaborative approach to these massively important issues facing the world today.
Well, Merrick, my first comment to that is, in reality, that landowner is not only a tenant for life, let's say he's a caretaker for the next generation. And I think that their landowners do play a very important role, and a role which is, let's say, very different from non-landowners. And let me explain that a little bit. Landowners in general, let's say, if I look at our membership, are involved in farming activities, in forestry, in nature conservation, and there is an aspect of cultural values also. If I take the farmer landowner, then that former landowner has land, and that land is capital. It's something which he wants to keep in a very good shape, because in the end, he wants to give that capital to the next generation, and he wants to do that, let's say, in a better shape, if possible, than the shape in which he got the land. If you are farming the land, but you're not owning the land is becoming a commodity. And that makes that a farmer not owning the land is using the land to make a profit. And that makes that it's of a lesser concern that the land is also keeping its capital value towards the next generation, because the next generation is not the farmer's next generation. And I think that exactly there, that there are a lot of opportunities, and that there is an opportunity also to steer landowners in a certain direction. Today, today and in the past, many of the landowners were directed on economic elements, like, for instance, subsidies coming from agriculture. Today, we see that there is an increasing pressure that, let's say, people, farmers and landowners in the countryside are also taking environmental pressures. So there, I think it would be a good idea that we see a little bit more the development of the payment for ecosystem services. And I think that is partly linked to one of the questions I've seen in the chat as the nature-based solutions. How is it possible that we are not making better use of them? And I think that, well, there too, exactly, that's the lack of, let's say, a good economic structure to give a reward to those really realizing nature-based solutions. And we are living in a very fascinating time, because I would have expected that, let's say, within the European Union, that it would be DG Environment within the Commission who would take an initiative to promote the payment for ecosystem services, but that is not happening. In reality, it's DG Agriculture who is now taking care of that, and we see that with carbon farming, which is very heavily promoted today within the framework of the Green Deal, that for the very first time ever, we are creating really a payment for ecosystem services and for a nature-based solution. And I think that can have a major impact, because that would give us the possibility not only to pay for specific environmental values, but we could also pay for, let's say, agricultural values, but agriculture doing it in an environmental friendly way. And that would change completely the way farming will be done in the future.
I think this is a very important aspect, and I would like to ask Mr. Dumitru maybe to comment on that.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you. There was this reference to the agri-policy remunerating the environmental services. I mean, you know, we are talking more and more about the public goods and public services delivered by the farmers. And since quite a long time now, we have introduced elements in the common agriculture policy to support more the public goods delivered by the farmers, and to get farmers more and more engaged in delivering on these goods. Society is more and more demanding on this. I mean, when you do this public survey to see the how the common agriculture policy is perceived by the large public, I think more and more public, they support farmers also because they are favorable to support farmers, because they consider they contribute to deliver these public goods. Of course, public intervention, it is something which we use to incentivize farmers to do this. But I think more and more we consider that also the public, they should recognize and they should contribute themselves by buying this kind of services. And I think the example given here to developing carbon farming, I mean, it's an initiative to try to bring businesses in to remunerate farmers also additionally or complementary to the public interventions for the climate services by storing carbon in soil, in grassland, in trees. So we are moving in this direction. We are developing this kind of incentives, developing kind of instruments for this. And yeah, we see the farmers getting this. These are voluntary commitments. Of course, we are also reinforcing the compulsory obligations by increasing the obligation in the, let's say, the regulated part, where we ask farmers to comply with more and more standards. And I think that the society is looking more and more on this. And on the other hand, we are trying also to make this visible, this services, this public goods visible. I mean, you know, there are already initiatives of using different labels where the consumer themselves, they have to recognize higher effort made by the farmers. I mean, I can take some example from, you know, organic farming, for instance, or I don't know, animal welfare labeling, when consumer themselves, they would like to pay a little bit more to reward farmers for the effort they are doing to apply this higher standard they value so much. So we are moving in this direction. We are providing instruments. There is also the issue how much the farmers can get in. You know, we have a principle here. We remunerate the additional cost and income foregone because we have also international obligation under the World Trade Organization. So we cannot incentivize above a certain level. We have also to take this into account. But yes, I think the policy, the common agricultural policy, you know, we pay more and more attention to this green component. We also fix level of expenditure. So in this new period, we have fixed 25% level of green expenditure into the first pillar of the common agricultural policy, and we preserve, or we are going to use a 35% level of expenditure in the second pillar. And I can tell you that from the information I have in hand so far, from the strategic plan we have adopted so far, I think that the member states in many cases, and at least in the second pillar, they are well above this level. So they are spending more on this kind of intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much for commenting on this. Are there any other comments from the audience or from the panel at this point? If not, I would like to pick up the next question from the chat. I'm reading this out from Peter Miranga. In acknowledgement of the disjoint policy and functional landscape master planning provisos that negates realization of sustainable landscapes, can a global paper guide spanning through all the professional fields be established under IFLA to guide such, among others? So I guess that from our participants here, maybe Katarina, you can be the one answering to this. I don't know. Would you like to comment?
Yes, I would like to comment, but I would like to give to Carlos also afterwards
of course.
Okay, the voice, because he's actually presenting IFLA here. I'm going to talk from the point of view of IFLA Europe. It's a very good question. It's really what we're looking, and all our actions, and even with this webinar too, you can understand that we're looking for the cooperation among different disciplines in order to address several issues. It is a good really idea of having like a guide or an instrument that can address several disciplines and work all together. This is something to consider. This is a good idea. But you have also to bear in mind that we're all volunteers, and what we're doing here is in our free time. We have to find a way of doing an instrument like this. And I believe that in IFLA world also, since we're addressing to IFLA here, they will embrace this idea and they can start thinking about it. So what you're thinking, Carlos, about this, I give you the voice to talk about it. You are muted if you can open the microphone.
Well, I think we are moving all the time to different ways of participation. That's why, as I was mentioned, we are very much focusing on practical issues and ways of organizing our practice or our, say, collaboration with communities. I think the call is for communities at the moment. For instance, when you call about heritage and learning different aspects that are our concern as landscape architects, there is a tradition. There is a way in which we all were educated, and somehow some of us develop our practices. Whereas there is a switch in so many ways, and then the pandemics put this on the table as well. Regarding agriculture, for instance, how we can move to different ways of production and distribution. Of course, we are not going to see it, but there is a switch. I mean, there is a total change of perspective coming on. So I think that, for instance, when we look at heritage and plans and things, and then I think that community involvement would allow us to be part of a group in which we certainly, because some people think that we are architects and landscape architects are sort of some kind of species that is going to disappear, and I don't see it that way. I think we've got our particular vision, which is a holistic one, and there are different disciplines that can participate all together. But I think that the way is to look at how communities can be involved, and how can we be part of them, and through active processes. I mean, rather than working through our offices or the classroom, a lot of things are going on directly in the field, and this is the way to which we are moving to, and that's something I was trying to show in my video, because we've done a number of experiences in this direction. So there would be the traditional ways, the formal ways, the way in which researchers and organizations help, but also there would be this new way in which we have specific problems to be solved by a community, and then the community approach it's a very important one. So I don't know if I am answering what the question was, but this is my view at the moment, that we are trying to, it's rather like, for instance, from the academic point of view, that we spend more time solving direct problems, and then every now and then we come back to the classroom to sort of organize the information, but we are mostly like doing the job in the field. And then regarding organizations, it's the same way, how we can become more involved and then be part of the community in understanding what's going on, and then providing solutions.
Thank you very much, Carlos, for sharing your opinion with us. And I see that Merrick raised the hand. So Merrick, would you like to comment on it?
Thank you, Steffi. I think the question about a global paper, there is a problem, and it links with what Carlos has rightly said, that the two audiences, urban and rural, are very different. The players are very different. And the problem, even with national policy, it's very difficult to make a national policy relevant locally. So it is incredibly important that we empower, as a profession, that connection between national policy and what the local needs are. We're great at that as a profession. In terms of, so I would agree with Carlos on, urban villages, really the community base, the cultural base of every city and town. If we had landscape master plans for every town and village and city, but developed bottom up, In terms of the rural agenda, I would suggest that, that Katerina made this point actually, that the landscape character areas, it would be a very good idea for that to be developed nationally, internationally, and form the focus of local agenda setting, because that would reflect both the cultural influences and the soils and microclimate and the ecosystems. And I think, again, as a profession, we can do that interpretation from national policy and set a very specific delivery framework at a landscape scale.
Yes, I totally agree. I mean, it's a matter of frameworks and leading trends rather than drawing sort of too formal and elaborated plans that are never going to be carried away, or that it takes so long to do so that at the end of the day, they simply don't work. So I think it's more like setting up frameworks through which communities or regions or whatever, so we technically can provide these frameworks for action, and they can come out of say different process agreements. But then at the end of the day, what you are doing is guiding trends. And at the moment, I am sort of a little bit biased, but I am very much involved into the community and practical response approach.
Thank you, Carlos. Anyone else who would like to comment on this issue?
Yes, I would be interested, because if discussing this, I think we have to take into account demography. What do I mean? That is in the last, well, not only in the last centuries, but that's especially in the last 8-9 centuries, people have been moving from the countryside into the city, up to a level that today more than 80% of the people are living in cities are immediately in their surroundings. That makes that those cities or the people living in those cities, on one side, they are becoming a growing political power, because you have let's say in Europe, one person, one vote system. That means that most of your votes are within the city. And let's say we are in a situation where people living in the city have a very clear view of what they are expecting from the countryside, because they want to go to the countryside in the weekend to walk, to bike, to take photographs, and they like to have great nature over there, so they can walk and have a look around. And at the same time, the knowledge on what the countryside is doing, the knowledge on how food is produced, is decreasing. And let's say that interaction is at a certain moment becoming, I would say, almost dangerous, because we are pushing the countryside in a number of directions. That the question will be, will the countryside in the future still be able to provide all of the services the city needs? We had before that cartoon where the green has to be in function of the city, or the city in function of the green. But let's say the green is an aspect of the countryside, and it's not the only aspect. And I think that for the city today, the focus is on the green element, but there are many more functions the countryside is providing towards the city. And that's something to take into account in this type of discussions.
Thank you very much. So I would actually like to add as well a question referring to that, because you mentioned now the importance of the rural also for the health and well-being of the urban communities. But do you think that this is also directed to all the other panelists, if you would like to comment? Do you think that the citizens are actually willing to pay for these ecosystem services which are provided by the rural?
Well, let's say up to a certain level. If I look at, let's say, private nature reserves, where people are paying an entrance fee, we see that people are willing to do so. So I would say yes. But there we have a situation where people go actively to the countryside to make use of the countryside. So that's a conscious decision, and at that moment people are willing to pay. It's very different when people in the city are entering a supermarket to buy food, because that's not a conscious decision of I go to the countryside to make use of a service delivered by the countryside. They are buying food, and they do not make the link with what the countryside is providing. I sometimes dare to say, if children are eating cornflakes, they have no clue what the basic ingredient of cornflakes is. And so there we are losing that link, and that's the moment that people are no longer willing to pay for those additional services. And okay, I heard earlier on, yes, you have a lot of labels on food today, but if the customer has to make a choice, it's still for 95% price driven, not the quality, not the number of kilocalories, not where the food is coming from.
Thank you very much. There are already 3 hands up, so I would like to ask Lena first, and then Eugene, maybe.
Yeah, it will be very short, but I just really agree with what you're saying, Jürgen, because this is exactly what's happening in Thessaloniki, my city. We have this huge urban sprawl, but people consciously bought a house and they put fruit trees and vegetable gardens so they can make use of the countryside. But that is somehow tricky because they're making use just their plot, and they probably need to be conscious of the vast agricultural area and natural area around them. Okay, and there is the other type of people, as you said, they just have this house outside the city center, but they still use the city center for everything else except sleep and Sunday walks in the countryside. So it's and now with the gas and petrol going high, and many people are returning to the city, so it's a tricky model. I'm not sure if these people would be willing to pay for a healthy countryside, but they are trying somehow to make use of it. Many people are tired of the city, the concrete mineral city. I think we need to discuss more on the subject. I find this subject very, very interesting, and seeing examples from all over the world how this is working in other places.
Thank you very much, Lena. Eugene, would you like to comment?
Yes, just very short. Perhaps to answer this question, we need also anthropologists and sociologists. This is not really the question for us, and economists, if we speak about the money. But I would add to this crucial question: what do we need from the countryside, especially for the urban dwellers, for the people from the city? Of course, next to the natural reserves and the landscape production, if they understand the proper food chain around their cities, or how the food chain works, you may not get the local cornflakes, but you could get the local vegetables at least. And to these questions, to enhance a little bit the connection of the urban people to the landscape and to the rural space, culture, we think that culture is a key ingredient, because the culture promoting and culture in a broad sense, the habits, the few remaining cultural buildings, the landscapes as cultural inheritance, not the intensive production of agriculture, but the small production, the small farms, and actually the gardens. This is an ingredient to enhance the pride and the local pride and the connection to the surrounding territory. And this helps. I'm not sure in which amount. And of course, each case is a little bit different. When it comes hard on hard and you don't have enough money, of course, you cannot be really picky on giving way to your desires and pride. But usually this thing helps a lot not only in sustaining a proper food chain and the quality of the landscape, but also in other issues, also inside cities. We are very keen on connecting to culture on design, because the same question refers to building buildings, if you want, no? Or repairing old ones. It's the same question all over. Why should we think of what it was or what it should be instead of choosing the speedy, quick thing? It's the problem that brought us into this place. It's why we discuss all these things today, and also on other terms. So yes. I think the connection to culture is one part of the answer.
Yeah, thank you very much. That I think was a very important remark. I would like to give the word to Merrick for a short last comment, and then I would like to wrap up our discussion.
Just two very quick comments. The first point, of course, is in democracies, that public investment really needs to be more accountable to our 80% who are living in our towns and cities. And I think that's something that the UK failed to do, was to demonstrate to urban populations the vital role that the farming community was playing in delivering the multifunctional outcomes. And the second point, I don't know whether we haven't actually talked about this, but it does seem to me that relying on imported food from unsustainable systems is a real tragedy. And certainly in the UK, there is now quite a strong debate about taking food out of countries where the water is being polluted, or the air is being polluted, or the biodiversity is being destructed by us, by importing food from unsustainable sources. So it's really important that we drive up the understanding of urban communities of the vital role that land management plays.
Thank you very much, Merrick. I think it was very, very interesting to hear all of your points of view in the discussion now. And I think it became clear to us how manifold this issue is that we are discussing here today. And actually, also now referring to the last comment of Merrick, it seems like it's calling really for a continuing discussion. So I would now give the word to Francesca to sort of make the last closing remarks for our discussion. And thanks from my side to all the speakers and panelists for your valuable contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steffi, and thank you to everybody, because really very, very interesting. We understood some things today. One is that cities are at the service of the green, and the countryside could provide a lot of not only food production, but also a lot of ecosystem services. Okay, how is possible to gather these two different point of view? Maybe in the past we used an industrial model, a city model, a citification of the rural landscape, introducing more machinery, more chemics, and what Merrick so well described to us. And the result are really not so good, because we have in many cases not sustainable landscape in rural area, and we have cities that suffers of a lot of problem, as we saw relating to the microclimate, the sealing of pavements and so on. And so maybe in the future we can think to have a ruralification of the cities, just to import some models that are edible forest, green infrastructure, vegetable allotments in sustainable ways, of course, and also another way also to live the communities and to look at the beauty. The beauty is outside us, but also is what we do every day. beginning from our breakfast, as Mr. Panescu said, because if we are aware of what we are introducing in our body, maybe we are more aware about the landscape that surround us. So I think that if we try to ruralification, to this ruralification of the cities, of course, is a provocation. Maybe the role of landscape architects are so important, because a master plan is needed just to gather all the biodiversity strategies that before Mr. Panescu said us. Maybe there are also the resources, and so we are ready to answer to all these difficult and huge questions. So thank you very much. This is our message from the landscape, the IFLA Europe, the Association of the International Federation of Landscape Architects. And really thank you so much to everybody.
Can I possibly ask you for 1 more minute, because the video that Carlos wanted us to play at the beginning, I would like to try to share it now. It does not take long time, if that is okay with everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was it, Steffi.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
Thank
bye.
you.
See you soon to our
As
next
well.
meeting. Thank you.